am really happy that you're here. I'm excited because every woman in the world wants some mansplaining.
I'm not so sure that's what the articles I've been reading lately are saying, but
Yeah, and you and I both work with a lot of people who are in the dating world, and they're so confused. We never know how to protect ourselves, how to be vulnerable, what it looks like, what it should look like, what it doesn't look like. And everyone's really confused. And I think everyone's in fear mode a lot of the time, which is the polar opposite of how we connect.
exactly. It's a confusing world out there. Everything's based on algorithms these days. People are not knowing how to respond to one another and not knowing how to
Mhm.
interpret certain signals. And then on top of it, you have typical attachment style issues playing a factor in all these connections that people are making.
100%. So, what are your thoughts on how attachment comes in play when you're beginning the stages of dating someone? What does it look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we're talking about just meeting people, right, on
Hmm.
the apps or going on a first date, meeting someone out in person, attachment's going to play a role,
Hmm.
whether it's secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment.
Yep.
Anytime you have a human relationship, especially one with a romantic connection, attachment styles are going to come out.
Hmm.
And so I think the thing that most people struggle with is when they are more on the insecure side of the attachment spectrum. And with that, you'll often see two sides of the same coin, right? You'll see someone who's avoidant or you'll see somebody who's anxious.
Hmm.
And in the dating world, an anxious attachment will show up as being over communicative.
Yep.
Right? So think of this as someone who comes off as being too clingy or too needy.
Yes.
They're constantly messaging, checking in, looking for reassurance, which can often push people away. On the opposite side, you have someone who is avoidant, and it seems like it's mixed messages being sent. So it becomes very confusing.
Yep.
So someone who's on the opposite side of an avoidant partner or person is often feeling unsure of whether or not that person is actually interested in them. And then when you have someone
And
who's anxious,
lack of details and information and consistency.
right, which is often the case. Not to be confused, however, with somebody who's just not interested.
Well, that's a question that I have. So let's say from the man's perspective, I'm making you represent every man out there in the dating world, but in a kind of generic sense, how do we know if someone is interested versus has more of an avoidant personality, which takes some time to warm up and feel close, and it might look the same? How do women know?
So it comes down to the person showing interest in investment. So the difference between someone who is avoidant versus someone who's just not interested is that the avoidant person will tend to still make plans, still show up. They might disappear for a couple days or a couple hours and not text back right away, but they'll eventually come back and make a plan to do something. They'll show interest of some sort, which is a little bit different than breadcrumbing, right? It's not
Mhm.
just sending a text every
Right.
couple of days to keep somebody communicating and interested. It's
Mhm.
actually making a plan and involving that person in their life in some way.
Yes.
Someone who's just not interested, or maybe they're just interested in sex, is not going to put a lot of effort into it. They'll maybe reach out every now and then. Oftentimes, the invitation will be to come over and watch Netflix or do something that is going to quickly lead to sex, maybe just grab a couple drinks at the bar, but they're not going to plan a date, right? The avoidant person, in most cases, is going to make an effort. They'll plan a date, they'll propose something, they'll involve you with their friends, with their family.
I also see, I always think of avoidance and not, there's nothing wrong, right? Avoidant is a really bad word because it denotes that they don't attach or they don't feel connection and they do. It's just how they regulate is internal, right? Less about the other person. So a lot of pop culture, narcissism and avoidant all the things. And yes, avoidantly attached people can not attach, right, based on what they've been through or trauma or whatever, but it doesn't mean that they don't. And so it's not that we're trying to only date people who are not avoidant. It just means we just want to be aware going into it, it's going to look a little different. And if that works for the person, right? And I always say avoidance, they more like they'll go out and they'll plan something and do something, but then they'll go internal to process for a couple days, disappear as they're processing everything, and then they'll come back out, be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And you're like, "What happened?" I'm confused, right? But it's not lack of interest. It's more like I think of it more like when they're babies, when babies are playing and they're like, and then they go back in and they're like, now I need to like be a little shy for a moment and get some quiet to process the nervous system. And that's kind of what they're doing. And then in order to identify it, and maybe somebody is insecure or anxious or even insecure to say, that doesn't feel great. I don't really know what you're feeling when you do that. And be able to communicate that to the person to say, maybe you don't want to see me for a couple days because you're processing your world, but I'd like to at least hear from you so I still know that you're interested.
I think it's important for people to recognize that both insecure types of attachment style come from the same fear of abandonment,
Yes.
just a different
100%.
response, right? So an insecure attachment, sorry, hopefully we can edit this.
Uh-huh.
An anxious attacher will approach the fear of abandonment with clinging on too tight, right? They're desperate. They don't want to let that person go. It's
Hmm.
where are you? I need you here. I need you in my sight. Because if you're out of my sight, then I don't know where you are.
Right.
It's object permanence. Whereas the more avoidant attacher, they're still scared of losing somebody and being abandoned. But
Yep.
when they get close to somebody, that's when that fear of abandonment really gets triggered. It's
Mhm.
triggered by that closeness.
The scariness of the vulnerability.
Right. So that scares them, and then they need a little space to process things in order
Right.
to keep being vulnerable. So for both partners, what's really important, getting back to your original statement when we started off, is that people need to feel safe and secure in their nervous systems. It's about building up that safety and security in the relationship. And both
Within
forms,
themselves, right? That yes, we want to find a partner that we can trust that's not going to always abandon us, but it's about if you're having a trigger, what can you do to identify, to help yourself, all the things so that you can show up in that engagement in the way that you want to and not from
exactly,
the fear base.
exactly. And when two people can create a safe space for each other in a relationship, that can actually heal a lot of attachment issues as
Yes.
well.
And themselves, right? That
And
it's not about the other person, it's about both, being able to do both.
right.
And that can create the secure attachment, right? And I always say most people don't have a secure attachment only because it's not what our parents were doing or not doing, but how we were registering what was happening around us, right? So most people don't have a secure attachment, or even if they do, it goes back and forth. We could have gotten through a major heartbreak or a really bad situation, and our nervous system cannot be that for a little while. And then it can go back to that when we're in a secure situation that feels better. And we can kind of most people have a couple of attachment styles that they play around with when they're becoming intimate.
Right? Not to neglect the disorganized attachment style, which is a mixture of both avoidant and
Yeah.
anxious, which as often comes from inconsistent parenting, right? So you have a parent that was there sometimes, not there other times. And so with people who grew up under that sort of parenting system, often become disorganized attachers.
Please don't leave me. You've left me, so now I'm going to go take care of myself.
Right.
So, all right. So, lots of pop culture conversations around narcissism and avoidant personality. And everyone seems to think that there are so many, and I'm going to use generics now, but that so many men are narcissists because they just want to play and they want a situationship. And we find the fun guy, and then the fun guy is a player, or we can't trust him, or whatever it is. So, what are your thoughts on the idea that many men are narcissists and that women need to be aware as they're dating for these narcissistic men?
It's a good question. And it's interesting to label someone as a narcissist, right? Because it's no longer a clinical definition. There is no, in the DSM, there is no diagnosis of narcissism. Not to say that people don't have narcissistic traits,
Yes.
both men and women. And the reality is that we all have a little bit of narcissism in us, right? Some more than others. And as children, we're all narcissists.
It's true.
Many of
Self-absorbed.
us grow out of that stage. I think in the context of dating, that word gets thrown around a lot. And what women really need to look out for are red flags, right? Does this person show empathy? Do they show care and concern,
Yep.
right? Can they take feedback and criticism? Or are they responding with narcissistic defense mechanisms?
Yes, but I'm going to caveat that with if I go to anyone, even myself, I'm a pretty empathic person. And if someone says, well, you did this, of course I'm gonna be like, no, I didn't. What? There's just this defensiveness. And I think that we've equated gaslighting for just normal defensiveness because that's just part of engaging in a relationship is like, no, I did text you. I did whatever it is, right? And that's not the same as gaslighting.
Right, exactly. And that brings up a lot of issues surrounding communication because when there's criticism, most people are going to defend themselves, right? So the defense mechanisms are going to come out.
Yep,
So when people are having a conflict, what's really important is to approach it with a deeper level of understanding that focuses on what you're feeling and
exactly.
what you need rather than approaching
Yes,
something with criticism and blame because that
yes,
begets defensiveness.
right. Exactly. I always say tell people use the I statements, right? If I don't hear from you for a couple of days, I get insecure and think you're not interested and it's confusing for me, right? Not like, well, you didn't text me in 2 days and that's and not to say that we're going to be perfect in communication, but then when somebody comes back with a defensiveness, it's not necessarily gaslighting. It's just normal. Well, I don't want you to go away, so of course I'm going to defend
Right.
as opposed to somebody who really does have narcissistic trait where it's really all about them all the time.
It's about them all the time. And it's when they make people question their own feelings.
Exactly.
Right. They'll tell you how you're feeling.
Right.
That's one form of gaslighting. But somebody defending themselves and explaining how they feel about something is not
Mhm.
gaslighting.
So the million dollar question is how do women know if a man is interested? And women see these things of are they asking me out? Are they paying for the date? Are they engaging in questions and answers? But I'm going to assume that most men think differently than there are just a few things that we show interest in. So how do we know the difference?
The difference is in getting to is he interested in dating me versus is he just interested in sex comes down to what we talked about when an anxious or sorry, an avoidant attacher versus somebody who's just not interested, right? It's the same kind of dynamic. Is he making plans? Is he doing things other than just inviting you over to have sex? Is he introducing you to friends and family? Is he involving you more in his life? Right? Someone who's interested is going to show interest. They're going to want to spend time with you beyond just a sexual relationship. That's the clearest sign.
But what if we think we like the person and we think they like us and we want to have, as part of that, a healthy sexual relationship? Do we need to wait a certain amount of dates for you guys to gain respect in the process?
Right? That's a great question. And there are no hard and fast rules to that.
Mhm.
But what the research does show is that an emotional connection needs to be made first for a man because an emotional connection will trigger vasopressin, which will make the man more attached to the. In contrast, women attach more with oxytocin, right? So
Yes,
if they have sex on the first night, they're going to feel attached to that partner.
right.
Men, on the other hand, if they have sex on the first night, they get a dopamine, and then it becomes more about gaining that reward.
Then they
That
keep wanting that reward. They keep wanting that dopamine.
they keep wanting that dopamine,
Uh-huh.
and that's how they tend to view the relationship because that emotional connection hadn't been formed yet.
Got it.
That's not to say that it can't come later, but it's already kind of messing up the process.
So sex doesn't bond a man to a woman, let's say, we're talking about the hormones. But if they like someone, it adds to the experience.
Exactly.
But
And so
what if you don't necessarily have an attachment to someone, but you're having sex with them and time is going on? Can it be a part of that bonding process
it can if an emotional connection is formed
through things?
through other mechanisms,
But if you're
right?
only going toward the dopamine, you're not spending the effort and energy onto the other things.
Right. So we have to look at what creates connection, what creates
Mhm.
real emotional connection.
Right.
It's vulnerability,
Yep.
it's communication, hearing each other, listening to each other, being there for one another.
Yep.
Right? So in the absence of that, a real emotional connection isn't forming. And so if you're only meeting for sex and expecting that to transform into an emotional connection that leads to a relationship, very unlikely to happen. And so then that's where it kind of is he showing interest? Is he making the effort to get to know you on an emotional level? And if he's not, then it's very unlikely to lead to anything.
Well, women will, the oxytocin that gets released during arousal and orgasm, right? The more we do this with the same person, the more that focus becomes. And then women will be like, no, it's just a situationship. I'm fine with that. And then their oxytocin begins to see all the good. Oh, look, he was talking about his family, so he must really want me to know him. Oh, look, he took me out to dinner. He must, it's increasing for him, right? And then when they've told themselves all these things and it doesn't really equate to much more, then they feel very hurt and confused because the oxytocin creates the positive regard of the connection and the nurturing, just like it does with babies, right? Which is the whole point. So I think it's important to note, just from a biological standpoint, that men also have oxytocin during this process, but the testosterone changes the effects of it.
Right.
When you
And
guys are going through oxytocin because you're connected with someone, it's less of a nurturing and more of a protective, right? You leave a bond going, I want to make sure they're okay.
well, and for men though, that actually is more vasopressin. So vasopressin will actually make a man want to be more of a protector and provider.
Oh,
It
interesting.
increases possessiveness as well. So there are negative trade-offs as well.
And so that leads a good question of, if a man is on the fence and we don't know how they feel, if we create some competition, is that helpful?
In what
Is
sense?
that our secret sauce?
To make it seem like other men are interested. I think for some men that could work. For
Hmm.
other men, that might just push them away. Right.
Like, oh, if there's competition, I'm not doing that.
Right.
But doesn't it make the woman more valuable? There's other men around.
Think it depends on what stage of
Okay.
dating you're in, right? So early on, if there's other interest, that can make the woman seem more attractive, right? There's scarcity, right? A lot of competition, competing for the same woman might make a man want to get into that competition and prove himself, right? Testosterone levels will go up if there's competition.
Ah,
However, if you're dating a woman for a period of time and she's making you feel jealous, most men are not going to want to be in that situation.
okay.
Feels manipulative, it also comes down to safety and vulnerability,
Yep.
right? If you're with somebody and you're opening up to them vulnerably and trying to create that emotional connection, and then there's doubts and
Mhm.
suspicions put into that, that's going to
Mhm.
make a man pull away.
Understood. Got it. So, all right, what about the man planning and paying? So, from my clinical experience in the room, men tend to have almost like a prey drive, for lack of better words, where they are going to go after what they want. It's going to be obvious when they are excited about someone, right? But I don't want to generalize on that because I know that some are a little bit more cautious and it's harder for them to do that. So women feel like if men are the one engaging, right? We're waiting for them to message us. We're waiting for them to plan something. We're waiting, they're paying for the date, whatever, that they have an interest. But is that true?
It could be, right? So if a man is generally planning things and paying for the date, it's a good
Mhm.
sign that there's interest. Doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be long-term interest there, right? So again, it's about building that emotional connection and seeing
Uh-huh.
how he's showing up through time. I think often now women also get confused if the man is maybe inviting them out for a coffee on a first date, thinking that that shows a lack of interest.
Right.
And I think the reality of the kind of financial situation that we all exist in these days is that dating is very expensive, right? And if you're the type of man who gets dates, because only a certain percentage of men on, let's say, the apps, right, are getting dates. 10% of men are getting most of the dates,
Really? Is that true?
which is leading to a lot of fatigue and burnout for the men who aren't getting dates, or
Uh,
they're getting dates every 6 months, right? So for the men that are getting dates,
there's a lot of eligible men out there that are just not even being
they're
seen.
exactly right, and not being seen and literally not being seen because of filters on these dating apps. If women are filtering for men over 6 feet tall, then you've already cut off about 90% of the population.
Understood.
You're handicapping your access to men. So when men are going out dating, they're just as interested as women are as seeing who's out there, meeting a bunch of people to find the right partner. So let's just say on average, a man is going on one date a week, times more than one date a week. I don't know where everyone is living who's maybe tuning into this, but if you live in a metro area like Washington, D.C., for two people to go out to dinner,
It's
not
a
even
$50 experience if you're just getting coffee.
it's over $100, right? For two people to go out to not even a very fancy restaurant.
Right.
And so for men who are dating once a week, that quickly adds up. So I think what we're seeing these days is a lot of men who want to meet as a pre-date, right? They're cautious of their investment into something. So there's saying, let's meet for coffee, let's go for a walk, let's see if there's an interest to go on an actual date, right? Maybe having a drink and then taking it from there. And I think there's a lot of women who are reading into that saying, oh, he's just not that interested,
Hmm.
which is not necessarily the case.
I think coffee is a great idea because I don't want to be stuck in a really long, expensive, yet maybe possibly boring or uncomfortable situation. I think coffee is a great idea for a first date.
Right? Who does, right? Who wants to sit across from somebody for 2 to 3 hours that they find when they meet in person, they have nothing
Yeah.
to talk.
So that's a really good question. So many women say to me, well, I went out with this guy and there was no chemistry, so I'm just not going to see him again. And then their first one date, one date, one date, one date, one date, and they're like, I'm not finding anybody. I can't just settle for someone I'm not attracted to. What are your thoughts on that? Do men have that same thought?
I think men do, right? I think everybody is looking for that spark. The question becomes, is it really that there's no possibility of a relationship building, or are you pushing somebody away a little bit too early? Obviously, attraction is important for men and women, right? That's the number one kind of indicator of if there's going to be a relationship is that you're attracted to somebody.
Yep.
So if there's no physical attraction, very unlikely to turn into something. But sometimes people will go out with somebody, they're like, they look fine or I'm attracted, but there's just something missing. There's many possible reasons for that. One might be that you have to get to know somebody for them to open up, to really see if there's that chemistry.
Yep.
People are nervous on first dates. They're not really being themselves. They're not
Yes.
really expressing who they are or being playful, right? So it might make sense to go on 2 to 3 dates to really see if that side of somebody comes out.
Mhm.
I often have found that a lot of people will turn dates into job interviews.
Yes.
And
That is my soapbox.
right. And if you're asking the same kind of questions that everybody
Yes.
asks on a typical date, what do you do? How
It's
many
also
siblings do you have?
scanning for connection. And if we hear something where it's like, oh, you travel and that's a trigger, then we're disconnecting. We've lost the entire date because we're interviewing, as opposed to getting to know another human across the table or whatever you're doing.
Right. And being vulnerable ourselves because it's very hard for the other person to open up if you're not opening up. Right. And I'm not saying to trauma dump
I was
because
just going
nobody,
to say, but not so much. We don't
but
need to have a 4 hour conversation about all of my past history stuff.
right. But scale vulnerability. You share a little bit. You see how does that person respond? Is it safe to share with them? And
Yep.
then that continues to grow through time.
Yes.
And that's why a second and a third and a fourth date could be important because you're building up that vulnerability.
Yep.
So I would say if there's a physical attraction of some sort, give it more than a first date.
I completely agree. I say at least 3 dates. One should be something with play, right? Because you really just want to laugh with the person. We want that curious, childlike playfulness to help with the bond.
Anything that you can get two people kind of active, doing something, being that childlike is going to be great for connection.
Yep. So explain to me what the stage 5 clinger is that we were talking about.
So not a psychological term,
Yes.
but it's associated with attachment.
Hmm.
So a stage 5 clinger tends to be somebody who has very anxious attachment, right? They're texting all day long. They're looking for that reassurance. They're looking for that object permanence,
Yes.
right? It really is what it comes down to.
Hmm.
And so that can easily push somebody away, both men and women. Nobody wants a stage 5 clinger,
Hmm.
right? So it's important to ask yourself if you tend to be anxiously attached, why am I communicating right now? What is
Great
my goal?
question. That's a really good question. Are we being intentional?
Right.
Yes.
Do I need to know what this person is doing every second of the day? Right? Can I trust this person? Because it shows up as both insecurity,
Yeah.
and people of both genders admire confidence in their partners. And it also shows up as a lack of trust on a
Yes.
certain level,
Yep.
right? Because it shows you're the type of person that needs to keep checking in.
That's
You don't,
really intense to take on somebody else's nervous system. I always say, go live your life and then come back and talk about it.
right?
So when men are turned off by that, what are they looking for? What makes them respect a woman that they're talking to?
I think men and women are very similar.
Hmm.
They want somebody who makes them feel safe, makes them feel calm, shows interest in them, right? So while physical attraction is important, men are looking for somebody that makes their life better, right? Doesn't add chaos to their lives, isn't going to be using them for things, right? So men are assessing, is this person genuinely interested in me or are they trying to get something out
What
of
do
me?
they think that women are trying to get out of them?
I think there's plenty of blogs and websites that have come out in the last 10 years since the rise of online dating where women will post that they've gone out on a date with a man every night of the week to get free. So when men are reading articles like
That's
that,
a lot of work.
it's out there,
Hmm.
right? So men are looking at that. Men who are well established are looking at
Um,
this woman gold digger, right? So I think it really depends on the man and where they're at with lives and how they're assessing the situation. So not
mhm.
all men are looking out for that, but those are some of the things that men are looking for. At the end of the day, it comes down to, does this person share my values? Are they interested in me? Do they bring peace and calmness to my life? And I think that's across genders.
True. Well, I'm going to say unhealed people are looking for, do you satiate my nervous system? Because I can't satiate it myself. And I want everybody to know that it's not about the other person really ever. There is an extreme of like, okay, well, 4 days, of course, but satiating our own nervous system, that we're okay in the unknown. There's a lot of unknown as we get to know each other. This could work out. You could be hurt. It might not work out. They could be an idiot. They, whatever, right? That there's, you're not going to know. And it's about being okay in the unknown. That's the part of the process.
Right. Well, and on the opposite side of that, related to you were saying a couple of moments ago about initial attraction, right? You go on a date, you're not
Mhm.
seeing the chemistry, the interest. There are a lot of people out there with trauma that only feel that interest and connection when there is that trauma showing up, a trauma that mirrors the trauma they've experienced in childhood and in the past. And they confuse that with excitement.
Yes.
So it's
Right.
important for people to know their own history and know why that's showing up. And if it's, is it a lack of trauma or is it a lack of chemistry?
Yeah. And same thing, if you're having a trauma response on a date, it might not be that this person is that same thing, whatever it was, and to recognize it, which is valid, but also not respond from it for clarification or being, I think we forget to be curious on a date.
Curious about others and ourselves.
So, what else do you hear in your room from men that you think women should know?
Great question. I think it's important for women to know that there are a lot of great men. There are a lot of men that want an emotional connection. They want a partner that they can grow with, that they can share things with, that they can build a life with. And it's a hard world out there for them for some of the reasons I've mentioned here, right? It's the dating apps are filtering them out. There are women who are not giving these men a chance for whatever reason, right? So they're out there, and it's important to know that. When it gets back to going on more than one date, give someone a chance to get to know you and to get to know them, right? Also watch out for red flags, right? So look out for the green flags. Is this person empathetic? Do they listen? Do they validate, right? Or are there the red flags there? Are you leaving that date feeling insecure?
Mhm.
Are you feeling worse about yourself?
Or
Are
maybe
you
you're feeling full of dopamine because they're very charismatic and they know how to treat you very well, and then they disappear for a few days, or then you get mixed messages.
right? Are you being love bombed?
What do you think the difference between love bombing is and just, I'm excited?
Yeah, it gets very confusing because I think sometimes people intentionally love bomb, and then some people unintentionally love bomb because they actually are interested and just don't really know how to navigate
Those
date.
butterflies can look like that.
Right.
Yep.
We tend to see it in two situations, which
Mhm.
makes it very complex to assess what's going on. Narcissists will love bomb. Come
Looks like
in,
what in the normal world? Let's unpop culture it.
right? It looks like showing up on a first or second date and throwing the world at somebody, telling them that they're the most beautiful person that they've ever met, taking them out to a $500 dinner, planning a vacation on the first date, right? And doing all these things for somebody that they don't even know yet, right? And I think sometimes people who are genuinely interested might have that tendency too.
Mm,
I think the difference is that the narcissist is doing it because they're trying to gain something.
right.
The person who's genuinely interested is often pedestaling that person.
Yes, that is a very good point.
They're-
Yes. Yep.
Right. They're putting them on a pedestal. They're
Right.
imagining future relationships, right? And I've seen a lot of my female clients do this as well. They'll meet
Yes.
somebody,
Yes.
they seem like the greatest person in the world. They can do no wrong. They're planning their wedding already. Right?
Hmm.
The reality is you have to get to know somebody, right? It doesn't make sense,
Everyone is a whole person, which are good parts and not so good parts. Everyone.
right?
Yep.
And that's where you often see a lot of disappointment later on down the road in
That
relationships.
hard.
Someone's parts all show up, good and bad,
Hmm.
and it doesn't match up to that spotlighted image that
Yep.
you had in the beginning, which was never the reality. So people are finding themselves disappointed in the fantasy or the fantasy not showing up. So you have to take people at face value.
Yep.
You have to judge them by how they're showing up in the present.
I always
Right.
say everything that you go through is a piece of the puzzle and that you don't see what the picture is for a while, right? That one piece is not more important than other pieces. It's all leaning to the whole picture of the person. And then you take that whole piece and say, is this whole piece, this whole picture, someone that I want to invest time on to become exclusive to see where this goes?
Right. And
Until then, it's just a piece of the little puzzle.
right. And you really can't assess that until
Mhm.
you've spent a lot of time with somebody.
People get very excited by that dopamine, and which is great, but we have to control the pace for
Right.
ourselves.
Dopamine is the chemical that's showing up everywhere. Right.
And oxytocin, right? Because it's like, well, we like each other, we're going to have a sexual relationship, and then it doesn't grow. And women are like, well, why can't we just have a sexual relationship where we get to know each other? And how do we navigate that? Because then it becomes a situationship.
Exactly. Well, and even before dates happen, right? The dopamine that people get from swiping on a dating app, right? So it's important to focus on intentionality there because everyone is experiencing it these days, right? You get a match, it's a dopamine hit. So people keep swiping. They might
Mhm.
even swipe on people that they're not that interested in just to get a match so they get that little rush. And
Yes.
so I think it's very important for people as they're on these dating apps, which
Mhm.
is for good or for bad, how most people tend to meet these days, is what is their goal? What is their intention? Are they there seeking external validation or are they there actually seeking genuine connection?
Right. And when I always look at, I heard this one place and I was like, gosh, this is brilliant. When we're matching, it's like a friend request on Facebook. Right. So let's say some random acquaintance or something friends you on Facebook and you're like, oh, and you hit add friend. And then after a few days, they're gone because they don't like your content. Oh, that's all they were seeing was this. But in the love world, in the dating apps, an acceptance and then a rejection, an acceptance and a rejection. But we're not really being accepted or rejected at that point. It's just like, what is the presentation in that moment? So it's really not either. As we really are like, oh, they're gone. They ghosted me. They rejected me. My feelings are hurt. Well, why? They didn't get to know you as a person at all.
Right. And I think it is important for people to adopt more of that view. That they are not rejecting you. They're
Yes. Or
rejecting
even
the people.
accepting you because they find you attractive on a piece of paper or whatever. It's not necessarily an acceptance and then a rejection.
Right. It's a couple of two-dimensional images
Right.
on an app.
Right.
You
And so if someone rejects you because you're beginning to build that picture, oh well, it's not really a rejection.
know? Right. Esther Perel refers to dating apps as introduction apps, right? And I think it's important that more people look at them like that. You're
Yes.
not actually dating on the app,
Yep.
but you're meeting
Yep.
somebody and then deciding, can we go out on a date? And
Yep.
I
100%.
think that speaks to another issue that people will tend to fall into of communicating for weeks and building up this connection on a dating app. My advice to people is get off the app, right? Take a little bit of time to make sure this is somebody that you want to spend time to meet, right?
Yep.
Make sure that maybe you have some common interests, some common
Yep.
values, right? Or looking for the same things in a relationship, and you can figure out a lot of that very quickly in a couple messages.
Mm.
It's sometimes often by reading their profile. Then plan a date because you're never going to know if there's going to be a good connection until you meet somebody in person.
But
There's
what
no,
if the man isn't planning something? Should you jump in and go, hey, we should probably meet? It's been a while.
it's not a bad idea, but it also could be a sign that he's really maybe not that interested.
But what if
He,
you're messaging on a regular basis?
he could be interested, but why isn't he planning the date?
That's what I want to ask you. Because women are really confused by that. Because it's like
Right.
they'll be consistent with the communication and then nothing is planned.
I think the reality is that in most situations, unless it's busy schedules getting in the way and people are traveling, and which is a reality, right? The older we get and the more involved our lives get, it can be hard to schedule. But if you're talking to somebody for weeks and there's no mention or effort made to at least try to schedule something, right? Even just if it's a month later, just to get something on the calendar, right? Because two people
Right.
are both busy, it's very unlikely that person is genuinely interested. They might be keeping you around, entertain them. People also get connection, the benefit of connection without any of the risk by talking to somebody, right? It's somebody's there. I can talk to somebody, right? People also talk to AI, right?
Yeah.
So it's a substitute.
But also, maybe there's something that they're not like, there's a distance thing, or there's well, I don't know what life would be like when they sound busy. I don't know, whatever, right? There might be also a concern that they're trying to navigate. And so, how do you open that conversation?
Same word.
If someone's, yes, right? The thought is like, if they're not making plans, they're not all interested, right? But maybe there's a distance thing. Maybe it's like, okay, well, they're saying they're really busy. Let's see if they continue to be able to engage. So I'm not putting my energy into something that this person wouldn't have a lot of time because they're saying how busy they are, or they live far away. I'm feeling like it would be a thing if I was to bond with this person. They live far away, right? Or whatever that there might be something that they're still feeling hesitant about, nothing about the person or whatever. That may be they're hesitating.
Well, I think that's why clear communication is so important. Just be
Yeah.
open, ask questions.
Yep.
Like, would you like to
I
plan
completely
something?
agree. That's my point. Exactly. Right.
If someone is so busy and they live so far away that it's hard to plan one date, it's going to be very hard to maintain a relationship that grows.
Right.
And so,
Exactly.
in those situations, people might want to ask themselves, why is it that I'm engaging with somebody that lives so far away when there might be many other potential matches that live closer to me? And I can tell you, I've seen in a lot of cases someone who is avoidant engaging in that pattern, right? It's safe.
Mm.
You're talking to somebody that maybe lives an
Got it.
hour or 2 hours away. You can keep talking, but you might not have to meet.
Good point.
It's the security of having somebody there, but you don't really have to be that vulnerable because you can always blame the distance.
Good point. So, attachment styles, past heartbreak, and finding ways to have distress tolerance during a time of unknown. So we don't need to be putting our whole eggs into a certain basket for object permanence until we know it's something that's solidly on the ground.
Right? The emotional connection.
Do men ever, so women are always concerned that there needs to be a certain level of skill or experience or whatever. And then they get nervous sleeping with someone because they're concerned that maybe they won't like it or whatever. Do men think that way?
Very few men think that way. The majority of men out there are not concerned to a certain degree.
Mm.
I think at a certain age, if say you're in your 30s, 40s or older and you're meeting somebody that is a virgin, that might be a concern, right? But in general, men are not worried about how experienced the woman is. You might find exceptions to that, but in
Mhm.
general, it's not the case.
And then women also are worried that a man, when they see them without clothes on, are unattracted to them and it changes things.
I would say to that same thing. Majority of men
Mhm.
doesn't bother. I think men are much more forgiving of imperfections and other things than women think they are,
Right. And that's why
right?
I wanted to ask, because I think the perception is, well, even if I wanted to have sex, it would make me so nervous. And then it's like, then the whole date is nerve-wracking because of all these insecurities and concerns and all the things. And I don't know if men actually think the way that women think that they do.
95% of men are not out there judging women's bodies when they're naked. They're appreciative to just be with a.
Good last point. And I'm also going to tell all men, if they're ever wondering, women don't really like long sex. What?
I'll pass the message along.
No, lasting a really long time is not fun and is not the goal. All right. Well, it was so good to see you.
You too.
Talk soon.